This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
I love what she does and how she does it. She is a professional storyteller and author of some amazing books and has an affinity for history. And America's 250th will be marked this year. So she's been doing some deep research on that. And we're going to dig into some of that research, some of the revelations. I'm just intrigued about how she can go back in time and find little facts and figures and insight and information and then turn it into a story. She is Carolyn Marshall Stearns, our professional of the year, back with us. How are you doing today?
I'm very good. Thank you.
This has got to be a fun time for you with history and the 250. I'm sure you're always looking for little pieces, little nuggets of information, right?
Little nuggets. I'm super excited. Got myself an America 250 hat.
Wow, look at that.
I'll wear to my school program next week. Exciting fifth graders about the nation's birthday and what's gone before us to make the place they call home.
Isn't it interesting how the 250 takes on different shapes? For example, yes, it's our country's 250th, but then individual municipalities, cities, villages, all of that, they have their own 250 history woven into the fabric of the big picture.
And every single person has a story for the 250th. Imagine the story the babies will tell that are born on July 4th this year.
Never even thought of that. Wow.
I was born on the 250th birthday of the nation. What a cool thing to have.
Seriously. Oof. Wow. What are you working on right now? I know you always got stuff going on there. What are you digging into?
So I've been hired by a museum, a historical home museum, and it has been in the same family for many generations until it was put into trust as a museum, which is great because it's saving that whole chunk of one family story in one place, which can inform us of how a family goes through time. And so they've asked me to come in to do the performance. They're also having a reenactment that day, and we're pulling this all together with storytelling and me doing an impersonation for a part of the time as one of the family members. So I will be in costume for that portion and portraying her and welcoming guests and giving them a little bit of the backstory of the family as they arrive. But I'm looking at their family members who served in our military through the different wars. So mostly right now, I'm still looking at the Revolution some, and also looking at the Civil War. Two monumental pieces of our history. And what I do for this deep research, because in order to tell their story, I have to feel kind of what they're feeling at the time. I want to share that emotional connection to the history, because history is a date and a name, and I just say Gettysburg, and people are going, yeah, okay. Gettysburg was so dreadful that the ripple effect of that is still felt today. And the way that we fought our own kin and the way that we lost so many young, promising men, and how many crippled people came out of that war from injuries that the only cure they had was an amputation. And that's impact on society at that time, and that's ripple effect. But I've been digging in, doing the deep research, so I have that emotional background. I knew I had some primary source material that mentions the units they were in. And so I've gone back to start skimming through this primary source. It's a collection of letters from great uncle Edward Whitaker. And this is on my husband's side of the family. And Uncle Edward enlisted as a teenager, 19, all gung-ho, going to beat him in 3 months. He and his brother raced down to, they were working in the capital city. He was 10th out of 16 children in the family. And his brother Daniel, and sister Adeline were all working in the capital city in a place called The Retreat, which was a novel institution treating mental health as an illness, not an insanity. And so they
Hmm.
were treating it with calmness and caring and food and green spaces. It's still there today. They call it the Institute of Living, and many famous people have gone there when they've become overwhelmed with life
Wow.
and
What can
and
you give us
still
a
work.
reference? Like around what year are you looking at right now?
I'm looking at 1861 and the get-go of the war when this young pair of brothers march off to war. Edward's a private. He's a
Mm,
kid.
mm.
And 5 years later, losing a brother, witnessing the death of his brother at the battle in Aldie, Virginia in 1863, Edward musters out at the close of the war, breveted brigadier general. He was an incredibly, incredibly intelligent man, and he wrote amazing letters home. Um, his sister had a daughter who married into this family, and the sister came to live at our farm. So there is a very tight and close connection to this to Edward. And let me give you a little snippet of one letter to just tell you how close people were to our president in that day and time. They were stationed outside of Washington, D.C., as the war was ramping up. We next visited the president's house, where in the yard we found his youngest boy riding a horse under the care of a servant. He is a little chap, can't talk plain, 8 years old, but has got spunk, we found. As on falling from the horse at a gallop, striking on his head and shoulder, he jumped up, scratched his head, caught the horse, returned him to the shed to be put on for another ride.
Mm.
Isn't that
Wow.
a, you don't see that in history books, but here's this regular soldier out of the farm fields of eastern Connecticut, and he's just hanging out with the president's kid.
Jeez. I love that time period. It is one of my favorite. I I actually believe I was around that time. I really do, just because I feel so connected to it. And as soon as you said 1861-ish, I was like, oh, okay. It was an interesting time. You had a little bit of technology, photography just beginning. It was still farms, and then it was still telegraph and things like that. So things were happening at that time. Unfortunately, some bad things were happening too.
A lot of things like using hot air balloons for reconnaissance, really
Mm.
novel uses of military, um, industry pushing hard to reach new goals in production here in the North, where we had a lot of industry because we have a lot of rivers. So they were, can we turn out woolen fabric for uniforms even faster? There was so much hardtack, the hard, yucky crackers that those poor guys had to try to survive on.
Mm.
There was so much left over at the close of the war in warehouses that they pulled it out for the Spanish-American War. How unappetizing.
Okay, describe what those crackers. What are we talking about here?
They're they're drier and less tasty than a saltine. They're just flour and water kind of thing. And most of the soldiers would drop them into the worms and all because they would get wormy traveling around camps and would drop the whole thing into their coffee, which was, made in 5 gallon pots and, with yesterday's grounds if they didn't have anything fresh. Yeah, eating on the road with the army was a rough gig, and hardtack was something light they could carry, that might sustain or cut the grumbles of a hungry stomach, but it wasn't the energy source that marching 10 or 15 or 25 miles in a day was would provide.
Oh my gosh! So what did they do to supplement that? Where's the source of protein even?
The army scavenged a lot out of desperation and need. berries, but come winter, that was even worse. And sometimes supply trains, and there's a piece of that, and this just didn't catch up, and then they were going hungry. And um, I have a little piece here I'll share, and this was part of where I'm getting that deep emotional context that I want to put into what I tell and how I can grab my audience when I'm performing and let them feel the weight of the war so that they understand what this family endured, especially when you have that relationship of letters because they're coming and going, and that's the only glimpse they have of this loved one who's far away and suffering.
Mm.
So this is just before the break of a battle. The poor inhabitants are scared to death. The slaves are seeking protection with us. Guards are catching spies. We will be attacked or shall attack soon. We are 7 miles apart with no idea of the number of troops on either side. Our camp utensils and all but weapons were left behind in the last camp. The railroad cars have been busy bringing troops, and nothing to sustain life or health has arrived here yet for us. A beautiful country, this, cherries, berries, etc. But he is lucky who can get away now. All men must stop by their arms when fight is so near. I never knew how hungry men would act before. But our officers are some to blame and will suffer if we live to return.
This is an actual letter.
This is an actual letter. That's primary resource research and the importance of written letters. So important in educating and informing people of the stories of how it really was.
I am blown away of the emotion, the depth of a letter like that. And it wasn't, somebody sitting back on a porch swing with a glass of lemonade on a beautiful 75-degree day. Well, I'm going to write some things down here. This should be nice. This is in the middle of battle, foraging for food. Your feet are killing you. Your shoes probably have holes in them, and and took the time to write that. But also, I feel I gotta say, I definitely want to say this, Carolyn. Writing that was probably healing to release what was inside, and they say that that's the beauty of journals. We should be doing that now, writing down how you're feeling, or if you talk to coaches, therapists, any type of healer, write a letter to those who may have done you wrong. You don't have to send it, but you're releasing that energy within. Profound.
Very
Amazing.
much so.
Mm.
To have a collection of letters such as this, I have copies. The originals are in the state library. His sister put them there in 1934. She knew the importance of preserving this. There were four brothers serving, Daniel and Edward, who left from Hartford, one from New Hampshire, one in the California theater of the war. And they lost Daniel. They lost one of four, which was sad. But by then, Edward was an officer. Edward brought his body home.
Mm.
And that was rare too. Only officers got that because that's why we have all those national cemeteries.
Are there any details on his passing?
Yeah, he was shot in the head right next to his brother, serving shoulder to shoulder and caring for each other. And after it was 1863, so they'd been in it 2 years. They did the first 3 months, and that's all they signed up for because they truly enlisted men thinking they'd be done in 3 months. And then knew at the end of 3 months it was going to be a very long war. And they came home, and Edward said, "We're not going to walk anymore." The regular soldiers walk and march everywhere. And so they enlisted in the cavalry, where Edward really could shine because he was an excellent horseman, and had the fifth Congressional Medal of Honor ever bestowed, given to him, for jumping the enemy lines on his horse and leading the charge that broke the enemy just before Appomattox. So really, really important pieces. And when they were on the battlefield at Appomattox, both sides facing off across a field ready to shoot at each other, and it was decided that the surrender was going to come, the Confederate Army, or the Army of Virginia it was at Appomattox, sent a rider across with the white flag, a piece of towel, and it was Edward who was sent back with him to accept the surrender of Robert E. Lee, but they'd scurried him away for fear of what the Union would do to their mighty leader. And so he went across to accept the surrender of the Army of Virginia, and was just in all these remarkable places. He led the victory parade at the end of the war. And he ended up, President Grant named him as Postmaster General to Connecticut. But first, he was the superintendent to finish the construction of the dome on the Capitol. Then he became postmaster, and after that, he went to Washington and became an attorney for inventions, a patent attorney.
Wow.
So just a brilliant, brilliant man.
This is your family.
This is my husband's great uncle.
I can't even imagine uncovering this. What did that feel like for you? You know, it is connected to family through marriage. But as you're going through, was your mind blown like it is for me? and that's not my family.
We kind of knew of him because his sister lived at the farm, and my husband's grandmother told us about Uncle Edward, and he was a common visitor there. So it's not so far removed as we might think, being Civil War. There is so at the time I really got to know Edward's story, I was homeschooling my son. We were focused on the Civil War. It was something he was highly interested in. We went to the town, it's the next town over where Edward was raised, and went to look in the archives in the town hall. Found a note from a member of their historical society who was someone I knew, that he was researching Edward. Left him a note there and said, we're here, we're family. I've got info, you've got info. And so we got together and nominated Edward for the Connecticut Veterans Hall of Fame.
Wow.
That award was bestowed by the governor they did a class of those. Each year they celebrate quite a few veterans, and some posthumously, as Edward was, but they have like a medal and a beautiful certificate and so forth. That medal was hung on my son's neck as he stood in full cavalry uniform, 12 years old, accepting in behalf, because he did Civil War reenacting. And so came, and then that Memorial Day rode his cavalry Morgan horse in full uniform in the Memorial Day parade, where I was the keynote speaker about what the small farm town has given our nation.
Oh my gosh.
Those are the stories we're celebrating in America 250.
You got that right.
It's a cornrow boy who made America proud.
Nobody talks about this stuff, and that's why I'm grateful that finally we have something to commemorate and bring these stories out. Even hearing what you're saying reminds me of the song, "The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down," which was the end of the Civil War. And they mentioned in the song 1865. There's a story in the song. It's fictional, though. That's the point. It's not real. Virgil Caine. Virgil, come quick and see. And what sparked this in my mind, the Robert E. Lee is mentioned in the song. But again, that's fiction. And here we are, listening to that song since 1969. These are true stories. What you're talking about here.
But it's fiction that was inspired.
Yes.
By the events of that time, and someone, and the writer of that piece of music had to have visited or had family that served or both.
Yes.
You can't go to Gettysburg and walk away untouched. And if you do, you got to look it deeply inward because your heart is stone. You cannot leave there without
Yeah.
feeling that incredible emotion of what we lost and what we gained on that battlefield that day.
Even listening to that song, it's emotional, and it's been performed by a number of different people. Joan Baez, the band, the band known as the band, and the story of how they took out these train tracks, which was a supply route, but it was the winter of '65, which was right around the end of that war. But yeah, you're right. That song had to come from something, so it was. Something inspired the writers to pass it on like that.
And the deep emotion of that song comes from that same place of deep understanding and research. And that's why that song has persisted in the memories of those who've listened to it. Why it could pop up so easily for you, because it echoed that resonance of known emotion.
Even hearing it play in my song, Virgil Come Quick, There Goes the Robert E. Lee. It's like, it's almost chilling. It's haunting. But I'm sure, like you said, the energy of whoever wrote it and what they witnessed in looking up history probably inspired it like you do. Amazing. Thank you for sharing this today. I'm still I'm still in awe. Even if you were telling this true story based on these letters, that would be fantastic. But it's based on lineage that you're connected to. This is what you do. How do we find you?
This is what I do.
And have been doing it for many years. If somebody's looking, let's say the 250s coming up here and they want a storyteller or interested in your books and what you do, what's your website, Carolyn?
Carolyn Stearns, Storyteller.com. I'm there. I'm on Amazon with my books. I love history, and I infuse it into everything I do.
And for that, I thank you. And I really mean that. Just that story, just the picture, whatever those crackers are called, we'll never forget that.
Hardtack.
And just the appreciation of what these people went through for a reason I just can't imagine. And here we, complain, well, it's raining today and it's chilly out. Yeah, shut up. You have no idea. You have no idea.
You didn't have to walk barefoot because your shoes wore away 3 months ago. Walk barefoot through knee-deep mud to get to the next fight.
Yeah. And like you said, 15 miles. Like, we complain about a flight of stairs. Carolyn, appreciate you and what you do. Thank you so much for today.
You have a great day. Thank you.
You too.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.